Hello and welcome. I'm Martin Cross. This is Crossy's Corner, and with me in the corner is one amazing coach. I would probably say, Rob, that you're one of the world's top coaches now. I don't know what you'd say to that, but welcome.
Well, great to be here, Crossy. I'm not going to comment on that, but really good to speak to you today.
Thank you. So give us an idea of what your life has been like, just post boat race, and how today's panning out for you.
Yeah, week after the boat race, got home with a hangover on the Monday morning, and pretty much my wife was off work, so hung out with the family for a few days, and then she went back to work. So I'm looking after my two girls and hanging out in Cambridge, and then had another week off. They went back to school. I ducked off to see my friends and did a bit of hiking for a day. But otherwise had pretty chilled out 2 weeks. And then this week, we're back training. So we started on Tuesday, a bit of erg training, been out in the water Wednesday, Thursday, some more ergs today. The guys have got a weight session. I'm in Goldie right now. This is the honours board behind me. And there's some whirring of machines downstairs as well. So yeah, back to the job.
Oh, that's interesting. I know I've been in that boathouse, and is there a solution for men's and women's names to be recorded, or are the women going to go in the boathouse at Ely? Or
we have that in Ely. It's a good question. There's not a lot of room on the wall in here, to be honest with you, but we have the honours boards up in Ely, so that's certainly rectified some piece, but potentially there's more to do here as well.
Yeah, and when you say people are back on the water, like, which people? Like, is it the whole Blue Boat and Goldie that you're working with? I mean, who's rowing and who's maybe not doing so much now?
Mostly the whole team. A couple of guys. We've got a couple of guys doing exams at the moment, so they're sort of doing some land training, trying to get through that before they return to us properly. But I think we'll lose 2 or 3 guys from the Blue Boat and Goldie for the summer, but otherwise I think we'll have a pretty strong contingent trying to push for Henley.
That's pretty cool. We might be able to talk about that as we go through, but I kind of want to talk about, unsurprisingly, I guess, about the 25 boat race. How surprised were you by your crew's margin of victory in the Blue Boat race?
Yeah, quite surprised, I suppose. I thought we would win. I knew we had a really good crew, and I think even though we sort of won the Charles earlier in the year, and we've shown some good performances, I feel like we were a bit under the radar somehow. Oxford obviously had some very strong individuals, in particular with the Stern 3, and then throughout their crew they had some really good rowers. So yeah, I think I certainly didn't expect us to win by that margin. I thought we would win, and I thought we would, be able to do it well. But no, the margin was, one of the biggest I've experienced.
Maybe, I guess, part of the answer might lie in something that you said, I think, after the boat race, that the 25 Blue Boat was I'm not sure. I think you said the best rather than the fastest. Maybe you can sort of talk to that a bit.
It's certainly it's the best and the fastest crew I've coached here for sure. They were able to do. I don't think we had a bad session along the way. We had good individuals without having any superstars, and we were strong through the whole boat. And they just were able to. They were able to push on, get better. We went through some difficult times with guys in and out. But we were always able to improve, I think. And they were a spectacular bunch to work with, and just kept going, kept improving. And I guess they're it's just really fun to work with people that they don't necessarily ask a ton of questions. They just sort of jump into it and trust what we're doing, I guess. And I think we've built that from a number of years. So the guys that we have come in at this point seem to trust the program and the coaching and the coaches, and that's a really wonderful thing to work with.
So obviously you had Tom Ford rowing in the crew for a lot of the training or some of the training. How similar was the speed with Dower at stroke as opposed to Tom Ford? So with Tom Ford on the bank.
It's always hard to tell. I mean, our training pieces don't look too different. I think, Tom adds a bit of an X factor, which is hard to make up. Dower's a fantastic rower, but took a little bit of pushing to take on the stroke seat. I think it's not been his home necessarily before this race. I knew he was capable of doing it 100%, but he's generally liked to sit in the sixth seat and drive boats from there. He's got a really great racing. I mean, he's just a super racer, but he wants to push himself to the limit, which potentially is, and beyond the limit, which potentially in the stroke seat is not always the best thing to do. Having a little bit of change to be able to, change gear literally at points when you need to. Tom was certainly probably more capable of doing that. And I think the interesting thing for me was, and I really tried to drive the guys on this, was that when we had Tom, he helped the crew progress. He helped Dower learn how to stroke the boat better. And Dower really, really got a huge amount out of sitting behind him. The length he was able to row, the consistency, he just rowed the same every single stroke, whatever was going on around him. And Dower wasn't necessarily as good before at doing that all the time. And then I think when we had to make the change and Dower was stroking, Dower really did that brilliantly and was able to jump into that role super, super well. I don't think he'd have been as good as that if he hadn't been able to row behind Tom.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. I kind of, when you said it's the best crew you ever coached, I kind of thought, oh well, the 22 crew obviously had Ollie and Tom in, as well as Sturich and Hunter and a bunch of others. What is it that made this crew better or faster than the 22 crew?
The 22 crew, we were a bit bits and pieces, if I'm really honest. Tom and Ollie were, right out there, totally exceptional. All the guys, really good guys. But I mean, Jamie and Simon hadn't picked up an oar in 5 years when they came to us in September, and weren't really planning on rowing. So they came in pulling ergo scores that I wouldn't probably want to mention, and had to really grind their way just to be in the boat, to be honest with you. And we had probably a bit of fitness concerns early on in the season with a few of the guys, and it took quite a lot to get them. And they got to a really good stage. Okay, we lost the race, of course, with that star-studded Oxford boat throughout, but and the boat rode really well. I mean, it definitely rode really well, and they rode very, very effectively. But we really lacked the horsepower to match Oxford. Despite having those two standout guys, there was a big disparity in sort of power and speed on the machine, if you like, from top to bottom. Whereas with this year's crew, it was much more linear, really. I mean, it was more consistent throughout. We switched Simon and Luca from 7 to PAL the day before the race, which really didn't make any difference, but I think it was the right thing to do given some circumstances. So I think it was just really even in terms of, there were guys that were better, of course, but we still had even talent through the boat that was able to. And for me, eights rowing is not about who your best people are. Probably the other side's got similar best people.
Yeah.
It's about the depth of the last guys in the boat. I think that makes a huge difference. And I was really confident about the guys we had, but also the collectiveness they had. They just were on point together all the time.
Yeah. Tom's come in with a question about the Peach system, which I'm going to ask you shortly. But you mentioned Simon and Luca, and you obviously made that switch after the crew naming. And Simon, I know, rode at 7 in the head of the Charles. And I was looking at that, thought, well, what's he doing? Why, Luca's been in the stroke seat, he's been in the sterner boats, like under 23 gold medalists. I'm just fascinated as to like why you made that switch, and maybe how much telemetry, if it had anything to do with it, was part of that decision.
Yeah, probably not much on the telemetry. I mean, there was nothing really in it. We just looked at. I thought Simon probably moved a little better with Dower. Maybe Luca moved a little better with Tom actually. So there was just slight differences there. I think as a pair, Dower and Simon was really good, and we tested it on training camp, just in training, and they moved very, very well in harmony together. And I thought that just clicked a little bit better. So that was the reason. But maybe a little bit of a risk, especially with Luca's experience. But we thought it clicked a small bit better, so we went with that. But cards on the table, Simon was a little ill the day before the race, so we flipped it back. Not that Bow is a soft seat. There's no soft seats.
Yeah.
We know that, but just felt like a little bit of pressure off him, able to manage himself in the bow without having being in the stern and being under perhaps that rhythm pressure was a little better. So that was the reason.
Yeah, we were talking before we went on air about the idea of catching the boat on the rise, and the Cambridge boat, I think particularly in relation to Oxford, just seemed to be rowing, I say beautifully, in the context of, maybe you can describe what that was. I wonder how close to perfection that their rowing was in terms of what you wanted, or in terms of what's possible over a boat race course.
I think they performed very well in the race actually, and that doesn't always happen. You don't always get 100%. I think technically, I think it was as good as we'd done, and that's the only 100% you can get right. You can't do better than you've done in training. Dower would sky around the catch quite a bit and would miss a little bit generally. I actually thought in the race it was the best I'd seen him row, so he probably rose in my expectations a little bit. He was able to get the blade down a little closer and be a little sharper, so that was great. Albeit in the stroke seat, I think it's important that you're not the first person in, because you're taking the whole load, and there could be like the problems we had with Matt the preceding year. We need to be quite careful. Matt was always really good at getting on the front, which perhaps you could argue was a little reason why he overspent himself. So I think I think they really bought in. They had great trust. They were super relaxed going onto the water, which was great to see. We had pretty simple, straightforward chats before the race. Always try and give them something to get a little X factor out on the day, but ultimately it's about doing the job and doing something they're proud of, and that's what we talk about all the time. And I think they did that brilliantly well. So super proud, yeah.
Yeah, that question that Tom's asked, which I'll just put up. I know you've had the system on the boat for quite some time, and I guess the guys were racing with it as well.
Yeah. No feedback to me on the race, but yes.
Yeah. So maybe you can talk to Tom's point.
Yeah. Super important for us. So we've dug into it hard the last few years. I think I'd say we're probably a little late into really using the live feedback, perhaps, compared to some programs. But we found it super useful. Just the level of account it holds everyone to is something you can't do if you don't have the data. So we use it a lot. I think we can do better with it. I think we can use it even more and go into more detail. I like to get I'm not anti-marginal gains. I'm really not, but I think there's a big factor of getting the most important things right and making sure that we do them as well as we can, and then we can add layers on top of that. And if we get lost in the weeds of trying to do a million different pieces right, we lose the fundamentals. And so the fundamental pieces of effective length, creating good force, at Cambridge, I think the interesting thing at Cambridge, which we could fall into a trap of a few years ago, was thinking we would out-row everyone, and that would be great. We'll row better than everyone, and we'll go faster. But if someone's crunching down 30, 40 more watts than we are, you've got to row incredibly well to be able to to counter that. So I think it's been good to hold the guys to account, to get this basics right, and then we can work on the rowing at the same time. And we can be effective, we can be loose, we can catch the boat on the rise, we can be really horizontal in the way we want to row. We can do all those things super well, as long as underneath it there's a fundamental good horsepower coming down and good grip and good power in the water.
I know coaches are obviously rightly very, very careful about sharing anything, but I'm just wondering, what would a good boat race rower, oarsman, be putting out in the middle of the race in terms of watts, and how consistent would that score be over the 16, 17 minutes of a boat race course?
Yeah, it'll vary a bit. I mean, I'd say I haven't actually delved into our figures yet from the race. I need to do that. I've held off a little. I'll say this, I don't think you'll mind me saying, but for the head of the Charles, so slightly shorter distance early in the season, James Robson was able to hold over 400 watts for the whole race, which is pretty exceptional. But it's going to be, it's going to be in the mid 300s to 400. I think that's the area that guys are going to be in.
Yeah. This is. I was having an interesting conversation with a GB rower who I won't actually mention, but about how watt-driven coaches can be. So I guess I'm sort of asking you, how do you avoid the temptation to be too driven by watts, or is that not possible?
We cover everything. I think that's the important factor. We do some stuff based off watts early in the season. If you create more watts, you get into a better boat the next day. But that doesn't carry all the way through to the race. And there's you might have a guy that's 20 kilos, two guys that are 20 kilos apart in weight, so you have to consider that. And the thing that the telemetry doesn't really read is what happens on the way forwards. So you can smash the blade in and create a lot of force and be early on the front, which is not going to help. If you're early on the way forwards and chasing it forwards, that's not helping the crew. But that probably will give you some more watts because you're taking them away from other people. So it's a balance always. We'll seat race, we'll swap guys in 4s, we'll swap guys in 8s, we'll do smaller boat testing, smaller boat racing. We really try and cover the bases throughout, and in the end up with what looks like the best lineups for race day. But we run it really late. We had some guys that were super unlucky this year. It was really close between Tom Mackey, who's in Goldie, and Luke Beaver, who made the blue boat in the end. Really, really tight. Very tough decisions on these guys, but we felt like it was the right one, but it was a hair's breadth between them. So yeah, I think as I said, for us, we could fall into that trap of just thinking we were going to row better than everyone. That's a big part of being at Cambridge and what we try and do, but we also have to have some good force under the water, some good figures on the wattage. Otherwise, we're not competing at the level we need to compete at. So, yeah, I just try and find the balance, really.
You mentioned there about recovery, and that's kind of, I suppose, comfortingly from a coach's perspective. In other words, there's something that you can do with your eyes that maybe the Peach system can't. How do you work with rowers on that recovery, and how much time do you spend on it?
I mean, a lot, really. I think the one thing I say to the guys all the time is if we're working on the catch, it's about the recovery. It's about what's happening beforehand. If we're working on the finish, it's about how we're applying the force and how the handle's coming towards us, how we're pushing the stretcher away, and what we're doing to achieve the finish. So it's the preceding piece that gets you the result you want. So if we want to catch the boat on the rise and get these blades down to the water on time, then it's about how we're approaching on the recovery and the pieces that lead up to that. So, we're doing 90% of our time is spent low rate, UT2, steady state. So inevitably, a lot of the time we're talking about what's going on in the recovery. And, I have my screen set up and my live speed set up, and I'm watching that a lot of the time. And I'm, coaching the recovery, and we get a split faster, we get 2 splits faster. okay, this is the big factor. You know, you tell them to hit the legs harder, well, they'll do it for a bit and then it'll fade off again after a while. So, you know, yeah, a lot of the time on the recovery, you know, moving in a way that's in sympathy with the boat, that's organized, that means we can arrive relaxed, loose, and able to put the blades down to the water in time with the boat. You know, I think that's is super key. And yeah, recovery coaching is you know probably the majority of the coaching.
Again, don't feel the need to say anything, but I just, when you talked about UT2, I just wondered, you know, what's a good boat race crew paddle at meters per second in, or, you know, 500 meter splits in UT2?
Do you know what? I don't think the crew this year was super fast. They could have chased it, but that wasn't the point. So it's low 140s, 500 meter splits the whole time. You turn into a headwind, it's high 140s. You know, it's in there somewhere, but I wouldn't say that's the factor. You could chase that number, and I have before. I've chased that number down, and I've had probably crews paddling faster than that, but they're expending themselves more and not necessarily training in the range they need to. So, you know, you're always after a little bit more speed, but can we do it with a little bit more efficiency, with the same power, with being in the right zone that we want to train in? That's the goal.
Yeah. There's something else I want to ask you, just from that point you've made. Ian, thanks for putting your question in. Just come into it in just a second. So what was different about Rob Baker, the coach, in 24-25 to Rob Baker, the coach, in 23-24? So I guess because you made that comment, you know, I've chased it in the past, I'm thinking, well, that's obviously evidence that he's learning and developing and doing things differently. So that's kind of what I'm asking you to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, it's a few percent every year. I think I'm still trying to do the same things, but I've got an inquisitive mind, and I don't like to do exactly the same thing all the time. That's boring. I want to do the right things. So the fundamental things need to be there that are important to my rowing stroke, to what we do at Cambridge. But I'm always trying to test things out, squeeze a little bit more out. So I think I'm a percentage on here or there, a little bit better, a little bit worse, probably in some ways. I mean, I don't think it isn't fully linear in that sense. I mean, the coach I was with Goldie, you know, how many years ago is it now? 17 or 18 years ago, was probably a bit better at coaching Goldie than this one is now, because I was a little bit more in tune with the guys. Maybe a bit more on their wavelength with that group of people. So in some ways, probably a lot better then. In other ways, hopefully a lot better now. You know, it's just, you know, we have to be, it's a cliche, but we have to be trying to learn all the time. But I would find it boring not to. And yeah, I think I'm a few percent, you know, different and better. I'd say probably the one piece I think coming into this point is more confident. You know, that would be the one piece, and you know that comes with a bit more success, right? It comes with people trusting you more and those things working out. So probably a little bit more confidence in myself and what we're trying to do.
Maybe you could pick a session, or, you know, bits from sessions. I'm just wondering, obviously coaching, you do so much off the water, but when you are coaching at the top of your game, when you're being the best that Rob Baker can be, what's it like for you coaching? What's going on for you? What are you seeing? What are you saying? What are people saying to you?
That's a good question. I guess you get in a bit of a zone on the water of what's happening with the boat, what's happening with the people. I think that's probably one of my biggest things. I'm trying to get in people's heads a little bit. I'm trying to think about what's going on with them, and that might be in a less good way. It might be they're going through some bad things, so you've got to try and sort of help them through those processes, whether it's with their university work, whether it's stuff at home, or whatever is going on in their lives. So there's that stuff. But when it's on the water, when it's in that sort of zone, you're trying to think about what they need to hear to push them a bit further to make that change that I want to make. If I keep saying the same thing and it's not happening, well, why isn't it happening? You know, do I need to say it harder? Do I need to say it better? Do I need to say it differently? So I guess I'm thinking about them and their application and what's going on in their heads, and then I'm trying to find ways to make the difference that we want to make. Maybe when it's really good, it's just trying to hold that and trying to keep them consistent. Towards the end of the sessions, there's often some mentions of the other side, because there's nothing that gets you in the zone more than thinking about the boat race. And there's no more motivation when you're coming down the Ely Strait than thinking, you know, in however many weeks, days, months, we're going to be side by side with Oxford coming under Hammersmith. You know, so yeah, little bits of motivation here or there, but just it's up here. That's what we're thinking about.
Yeah.
That's what we're thinking about fundamentally.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Got a few questions coming in. I'm going to go with Pete Jager. I suspect I might know the answer to this question, but Pete asked, I think, in response to what you were saying, in terms of balance between mentoring individuals or the whole squad, which I know is a thing because you know your chief coach, or the crew. How does that balance out?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's the short answer. In terms of actual percentage, I'm not sure. I mean, look, I've got a great team of people here. Bill Lucas is coaching Goldie. Nick Acox coaches our lightweights, and then we've got a good team of S&C as well. So there's a lot of people that are working, and you know, with talking about the Blue Boat and Goldie, Bill will be, you know, looking for that mentoring side. He'll be doing that a lot more with the guys in that end of things, and then there'll be a lot of crossover. But you know, I think we want to look at that individual side a lot. That's really important to the program. We don't have the hugest squad in the world. It's not like, you know, some of these American programs where they might have 50, 60 guys, and it's probably hard to mentor the individual, I suspect, when you've got that many people. You know, we'll be down to mid-20s on the heavy side. We've got the lightweight program as well. So, you know, I've got to produce an overall program that works for everyone. And then as individual coaches within the program, you know, we've got to get bits out of those individuals, and my job will be more with the Blue Boat. Bill's will be Goldie, and Nick's will be the lightweights. And then, you know, the people that come and help us. So, you know, Donald Leggett will come and do work with us, which is super beneficial. And then Marko Banovic is going to be doing a lot with me with the Blue Boat. You know, and he'll have good insights, good chats with individuals as well along the way, which is super helpful. Eases the burden for me in terms of what we're trying to get out of everyone. So, you know, I think the whole of the coaching, the whole of the crew coaching is really important. And then I'd say the mentoring of the individual is as important. The coaching of the individual is not, when it gets closer to the race, is probably less important, but the mentoring of the individual. So there's two different things there in my mind. Making sure that, you know, Martin's ready to race the boat race, whether he's got to move his little finger or not at this point is irrelevant, but he's got to, you know, is he ready to race? Is he mentally ready to race? And that's the big part of the mentoring that comes into the individual aspect.
Yeah, that was a really interesting answer. I'm going to go with Ian's question, sorry, which is kind of a little bit out of what we were talking about, and I'm going to come back to that. This question of Station, I presume he's got his stats right.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Actually, yeah, that's this. He's got his stats right. Yeah, that's right. We've actually not been on Surrey since 2019, but we chose Middlesex in 22, possibly wrongly. Tom Nolly would tell you wrongly, but I really like racing on Middlesex. It's fair to say. I think I don't want to say too much about my tactics because it's quite important. But I'm really comfortable on that station. I think people haven't been comfortable on the station. That's a real mistake. So the Surrey tactic is fairly basic. I think Middlesex can be won in a few different ways. But yeah, I mean, ultimately it's about rowing and boat speed, and it doesn't matter what station you're on. But I think it's there's definitely a, oh yes, when we win the toss with one Surrey, that's great. That's a place I don't want to be in. It's a really bad boat race coach's place to be in, and certainly I think we know how to win on Middlesex in a few different ways, and I'm really, really comfortable on that station. So yeah, it's been good.
Oh, that's really interesting. I kind of want to go back to what you were talking about a little bit, which is going to kind of get into you and people who have influenced you as a coach. And I know we were talking about Tim McLaren before we went on air, but with Marko Banovic, obviously he's been involved with you for a while. I know he was hugely significant in the Zinkovic brothers winning that gold medal in Paris. What is it you use him for, or what does he bring to your squad?
Yeah, Marko was still pretty close with Donald, and he after Tokyo he sent a message to Donald saying, "Look, I'd love to be involved, do some coaching." So Marko and I had a chat, and I wasn't sure where it would go. I think I've always worked well with other coaches, but it's got to be the right fit. And basically, and Tim McLaren would be a good example. Like Tim's a big inspiration for me as a coach, and we worked really well together and still do.
Why is he a big inspiration?
Well, to go back to Tim, I started coaching at Cambridge in 2001 as an assistant down the ranks, and I lived in the flat which is just there. And Tim would come and stay with me. He would come over and do 2-week blocks with us. He's been doing that a little bit less recently, maybe, but he'd been doing that pretty much since about 95, 96. And he's just, I think he's an incredible coach. But he talks about rowing in a different way than anyone I'd ever heard of before. He would speak about it, and he would speak about other sports in the same way. He'd know about pretty much every sport going. He'd have an idea of it. He'd have some knowledge of it, and he'd had some real insight into a lot of different sports. And I just found it a really unique perspective. And Tim will say, "Martin, I want you to put the catch in like this," and he'll say to someone else in the crew, "I want you to put the catch in like this." Completely opposites. And guys would be like, "Well, Tim, you said I should do the catch like this, and you said to Martin that he should do it like this." And Tim would be like, "Yeah." And he'd be like, "But it's totally different." It's like, "Yes, because that's what." And Tim would be probably a bit more brutal at those points, but be like, "That's what you need to hear. That's how you need to hear it." And that just rung really. It made so much sense to me, and I don't see too many coaches doing that. They're really a lot of coaches are really ready to say the same thing and be consistent, but I found that super insightful. That and that's what it goes back to the individual. It's not about saying some cliche or having some buzzword. It's about trying to get an individual to change, and that only happens if you change the wiring in their head and you're able to get through to the wiring in their head. And I found that with Tim different to almost anyone I've ever worked with.
Can I just, what you're describing, so this is me, what you're describing, in my opinion, is like a coaching guru, someone at a higher level of wisdom. How close are you to being a coaching guru?
I don't think very close. No. Look. If I can help people out, I'd love to help people out, and perhaps that's something I'll move towards in the latter part of my career, and it's fun to do. I think that's something we've done uniquely at Cambridge, having this guest coach system. And to go back to Marko, we've been able to work really well. I wasn't sure whether it would work super well or not, and I said, "Come over for a week. Let's see what happens." And we clicked very well together. We're very different characters, but we see rowing on quite a similar level, I think. So it's just good to have that offset. But I think, ultimately, I think that's, there aren't many programs in the world that open themselves up. There aren't many coaches actually that will allow people to come in and come and coach. And I'm prepared to do that because I just want us to get faster. And Marko is able to make me look like a better coach and help us as are my assistants. So, I think it's just about being a collaborative team and push things on, and not letting your ego get in the way. It's not about me; it's about the guys winning the race. That's what it's about.
Yeah, I had a thought bubble, which we're not going to go down that road at this point. But as you said, there's not many programs. A bubble came into my head: Caversham ? But because I don't suspect there's many guest coaches at Caversham, but I may be wrong on that. Giovanni Ippolito, thanks for your question, Giovanni. He's talking about athletes that surprised or impressed you. I was I was going to ask you, I thought it was probably an unfair question. Who's the most difficult athlete? Sorry, I'll rephrase that. Who's the most challenging athlete that you've worked with when you're at Cambridge? And then I thought, oh, who's the athlete you've got most out of that it didn't look like that? And then I also had a thought bubble about James Cracknell as one of those questions, but you don't have to talk about James, but maybe
I'll talk about James actually, and I think I'd love to talk about James, and he's a very close friend of mine now, and I've put him up for a few jobs recently, so he better do a good job with them. But
he's got one, hasn't he?
He has got one, yeah. But I love James, and I think he's super misunderstood actually. In terms of a person to work with, he was one of my favorite people to work with in terms of his mentality. I mean, wow. you know him well, Martin, and I've never met anyone so driven and so single-minded when he wants to be, that he could just compartmentalize things that were going on in his life, and he had a lot going on in his life when he was at Cambridge, and just focus on the task in hand. I know it was a real eye-opener actually of what you can achieve. And so he's sort of, I'll give you him as one of my favorite athletes in that sense to work with, and my worst because he was terrible physically. I mean, appalling. He did some testing before he came to Cambridge, and his anaerobic threshold and his VO2 max were basically the same. So it meant that if he went over threshold slightly, he was gone. But he could sit just below threshold forever. So we did an hour test, and he was like in the top 4 or 5 guys. But when it came to 2K or 5K testing, he was quite well down that bunch of guys. So physically, but he took care of a lot of that himself. He got injured, so he did loads of bike work. He did loads of extras. He really drove himself on, but it was a physical challenge. I had him we had him on a seat pad that was about this thick. It was like 2 phone deliveries because you had to get his whole body up and over, which was a challenge. So he was, but amazing to work with, and actually super supportive of me in that year. It was my first year coaching the men, having coached the women. It wasn't a particularly easy year, I'll be honest. The guys weren't necessarily sort of fully bought into the program of things I wanted to do at that stage. So that was a bit of a challenge, and James backed me 100% and was brilliant.
Oh, wow. You mentioned the women there. I'm going to come back to talk about the 25 race and stuff, but I think I think we need to talk about your time as CUBC women's coach. And like with James, you worked obviously with some great athletes there, like Liv Coffey and Imogen Grant. How significant to you was that time working as CUBC women's?
I mean, game changing for me. It was a great opportunity. I'd just been coaching in Ireland, and it was a really good time to come back to the UK. My wife wanted to come back as well, and a brilliant opportunity. It was very difficult in the first few years. My first year with the women's team for the 2013 race, we didn't have one athlete that had rowed before they came to Cambridge. So everyone had not
wow.
at Cambridge. And Oxford were a little bit more organised behind the scenes. They had some really good athletes who'd rowed Junior Worlds, actually done some graduate rowing as well in the US. And actually that first race was raced at Dorney, and we got to, I can't remember the overall result, but halfway we were in front, and we gave them a good run for their money. And I thought from then on it'd be this linear process that we would just get faster and faster and faster, and it didn't work that way. So it was a real lesson. But and it was really tough, really very tough, just because we had great people, great women, they're really trying to do good things, but they just didn't have any experience or athletic training to be at that point, at that level. So it took us a really hard few years to build the program. And then it was almost like, it felt like an overnight success, because in 2017, we had some good people come in from the US. We'd built great people through, like Imogen, Melissa Wilson, Holly Hill. We developed those good people. It's with a number of good people in Blondie that year as well that had come through the system, rode under 23 international like Taya Zabel. And so those people progressed through, and we had a good few people. Claire Lamb as well from the Irish team came in.
The Irish team.
And we had I think it was a pretty spectacular crew, actually. We were, I think, 3 seconds behind a sort of Leander full international boat at the head of the river.
Oh, wow.
And, really just missed that one, which was a shame. And had a pretty spectacular win. And then in 18, Liv came in. We were second in the head again to Leander, and had an exceptional crew. So, it was really great, really great. Got to a great point, and I'm really ecstatic the women's team's been able to go on from strength to strength with Paddy now, and win all these races on the trot. But it was wonderful to be part of. Imogen's career has been, obviously incredible. I remember just on the cam out here, I remember my eldest daughter's 11 now. When she was, I don't know, 2 or 3 or something, she was on the bike and I was cycling up and down, and Imogen splashing around in a Janasek to learn to scull. And she learned to scull, in a sweet program. We went to under 23s with what she won lightweight there. So it was, that's just been an incredible journey. But to see, those athletes go on and do what they've done has been amazing.
I know you had Grace Prendergast around in the women's squad with Imogen in 22, and I believe Kerry Williams, I think now, was also over briefly. What was it like having athletes of that caliber over? I guess it was, fantastic for the women's squad, but what, if anything, did it mean for the men that you were working with?
Yeah, having Grace around, I think Tom and Ollie had a really big bond with Grace, and with Ruby, who was over doing the MBA with Ollie as well. So I think, it's, I think in the end, people are, the question I hate the most is what's the difference between coaching men and women, which is, I think, a bit of a nonsense question, really. Of course, there are differences. There's differences with every athlete you work with, and that's what you should be thinking about. But when it comes to the top level people, they're very like-minded people. They get on well. They, I think in particular with that group, and we had the Kiwi pair of women, we had the British pair of men overtraining a bit together at times. Mike Roger, he messaged me this morning actually, who coached them and coaches the Kiwis. I'm pretty close with Mike. We have a good relationship, and it's just fun to be having those people around. Grace was just a super level head, just so stable and so confidence building, I think, for the women's team that year. So yeah, just great athletes and tremendous people to have around.
So Peter Jagos asked another question. When I read the question about making changes to rig and technique, so my question was, that's interesting. Does Rob rig everybody on the same rig, or does he make adjustments in rig depending on individuals?
Depends how do you define rig. Obviously foot stretchers are in different places. Heights are in different places for sure. There's some individual stuff everywhere, but it's not that complicated, to be honest. I don't think that's where the great gains are found, and I think you can go down that route. And I've had, there are some people, you've had some talented rowers who are, maybe very different body shapes, very short bodies, long legs. Some people that struggle to get length. Sometimes you might span them in and try stuff out. I've never found it to be game changing, to be honest with you. So I've tried everything in that respect, but never really found it to be super game changing. So we'll look at stuff for sure. Again, let's get the big things right, and then let's try and tinker a bit as well and see if we can find some gains there somewhere. And we'll definitely do that. But let's get the fundamental stuff right. And with the boat race, in terms of gearing on the oars and on the span, we could be in a nice tailwind, then we could be in the most fiercest headwind when we come round a corner. So it has to be quite a medium sort of gearing to row the race. Yeah. So it's a little bit less about the individual and more about what the race throws at us.
It's really interesting. So one of the turning to the 25 race, I was asked by the BBC just to say some stuff about the controversies between the two clubs, and one of the things I said, which may have been unfair or fair, I don't know, but was I don't know what planet Rob Baker thought he was on to imagine that he would get Tom Ford into. That Oxford would let him put Tom Ford into a boat race crew. So how fair or unfair was that comment of mine?
I mean, I think it's fair on the basis of what you knew, but actually there's stuff going on behind the scenes which a lot of people are unaware of. So I can't actually delve into that piece too much because I'm not in a position to do that really. But there were processes going on that potentially could have forced our hand that we had to support it. So there's some rules in place here which that are going to have discussion that I have thoughts on, which again I probably can't say too much on if I'm really honest at this point. But it's just not as simple as it seemed, Crossy, to be fair.
Yeah.
So there's other stuff going on in the background that meant we had to consider that option for sure.
Yeah. With Matt and the PGCE stuff and the two women, obviously that was a different issue. I guess what I'm thinking was there was loads of stuff. It seemed from the outside, because everybody from the outside knew there was things going on, but nobody was saying anything until CUBC came out with that statement. And then it all sort of became public. How do you deal with all that stuff while it's going on as a coach?
Well, I think the guys, look, all the time we're trying to be. I'm trying to do two things with the guys. I'm trying to look after them at the first point of call, and I'm trying to keep them informed as well as we can. So just be honest about what's in front. This has happened. This is what we might have to deal with. And then with those individuals involved, I mean, with Matt and with Tom, obviously we've had some really awfully difficult conversations. And with Matt, I had to tell him twice he couldn't do the boat race because of the changing decisions. Which, I mean, honestly, just awful. And they're both incredible guys, and it's just. It's been really difficult. But what you have to do is, again, you have to compartmentalize a bit, like I talked about with James earlier. I have to try and look after those individuals as much as I can in the situation, and then I have to keep the job running on. The guys have to keep the job running on, and they know that they would do those individuals a disservice if we weren't performing and if we weren't, pushing ourselves and doing what we can do. The luxury, I suppose, in some ways that we had this year is we had such a strong depth in squad. So, I would say the knock on in the end, I mean, I'm not going to talk about who may or may not have made the boat if we had Matt in, but frankly, it was all very tight with those guys. The knock on probably with Goldie it was more significant. So at one point in the year, we thought we were going to have. And we had a great Goldie this year, but we could have had a super exceptional Goldie. And we raced not the lineup in the head of the river and was the fastest university, but we had the race crew in the end was a lot stronger than that crew, and there were lineups that were a lot stronger than that. So there was a bit of a knock on there, and we just don't have. we had really good depth through those two crews, but then we didn't have super big numbers of guys, so it was a little bit of a struggle always to field the boat. In the end, for Goldie, there were times when we had a bit of illness and we lost a bit of training time there. So we were lucky in that respect. But you've got to keep the job running, and you can have things going on, and that's part of my job as a coach, to manage the situations. And you can't cry about it, and you just have to, the job's to win the boat race. That's what we're here for. That's the motivation. Bad things happen along the way, and we have to deal with them, and we have to keep the job running, and that can't affect us. So that's the message all the time. And the guys did a brilliant job of that. I mean, it really, they could have dropped the ball, frankly, and you wouldn't have chastised them too hard about it. But they did a great job the whole time.
I just want, this is probably an impossible question to answer, but how much did what went on in terms of motivation or drive contribute to the margin that Cambridge won the 25 boat race by?
I don't know.
Good answer. Yeah, let's leave it at that.
Okay.
I'm not sure that was in terms of some of the questions that Ian Gregg has asked another question, and he wants to know what you're going to race at Henley, basically.
Yeah, he's not getting that answer. He's not getting that answer. We'll see. We'll see. We have a little working out to do with our training over the next few weeks and getting through these exams and some of these other things that come our way in the May term. It's notoriously difficult here at Cambridge. I'll have guys that are doing exams where they're final exams, and that's like 90% of their grade for their entire degree, even 100% sometimes. It's an incredibly tough process. So I have to understand that and have to help them get through it. So I don't know yet, and I'm not giving that away. But we've got big plans. It's fair to say, and we've got exciting plans, and we want to do something really good. So the guys are motivated, and we're on it. So yeah, wait and see.
Last thing on the 25 stuff. How far would you like to see in the future a rule that, so the so-called Cracknell rule disappears, and a situation where PGCE students are allowed to compete? And just for full disclosure, that's something I'd like to see. But how likely is that to happen, and what's your view about it?
I'll just put it this way, Martin. I think we should be not trying to disclude proper students from rowing in the boat race. I think we should be. The important piece is there's parity across the two universities, and that we have people doing full-time courses. There'd be a problem if we had people doing part-time courses at the universities, and there are various things where you can do that. But I think the important factor is we have full-time students, and I think the race is enriched by having quality people, quality individuals involved in it.
How much did you suffer from not having Brooks to race as part of the warm-up fixture series this year?
Well, it's a shame because felt like we had a good crew to race them, so it's just disappointment really. Yeah, I mean we haven't had we didn't have a hard race, so that's a problem in itself. As it happens, I think the guys raced really well on the day, so I don't think it affected us too much. Is the short answer. And we've got good internal competition, so we pushed that. But yeah, it was a real shame. I want to race them. There's this great program. The quality that comes out of their crews is obviously is fantastic. So I want to race them. Want to put our best up against them. So yeah, that was a real shame for us.
This is a bit of fantasy rowing now, but clearly there's a couple of great eights racing each other in the USA now, Washington and Cal, with apologies to Brown and Harvard and Dartmouth and all the other good crews. How would your 25 Cambridge boat, do you think, go up against those sort of guys?
It's impossible to say, isn't it?
I know, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Well, we did race Washington at the Charles Mine.
Oh, I forgot. Of course.
So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, that's a good shout, actually.
Early race, and you can make and take or whatever. But I think the important factor for me there is, I mean, there's definitely been a narrative that the US universities have overtaken us. And, you know, look, I've got so much respect for the programs over there in the competition of that league. It's incredible. But, you know, it's really significant for us to go over and win the Charles, because to show that we're on that level, and we want to do that consistently, you know, you know, we're not going to win it every year, but if we can be consistently up there, that's a really important thing for me, because I want this to be, you know, best program around. So, you know, to go there and do that was a really big day for us, and it enforced the confidence in our program. For the guys, it enforced that. We didn't do any particular prep for it. We really, you know, we were racing different eights, changing people around, training as we would normally train at that point of the year. So that was a really great performance for those guys. You know, Dow de Graaf went back to Harvard and you know, able to get the win there was really big for him. You know, Mike Blomqvist, who's married to Liv Coffey, said to me afterwards, he said, well, you know, the last time you won the Head of the Charles, you lost the boat race. And I said, I did know that, Mike, thank you. And I told the guys that as soon as they got off the water after winning the Charles. That was the very sentence that I used. So we had to be really sure that didn't lead us the wrong direction.
Yeah, Mike Blomqvist, of course, a boat race winner with Oxford in 2005.
Oxford, yeah. Correct. So you know, that was, but that was a good legitimizer for us in world rowing and university rowing, that we were doing some good things.
Yeah. Another question. There's a couple of questions here. Thank you from Name 64, whoever you are, who's interested in your crew composition. Obviously, James Robson, fantastic asset for you. Was there ever a question mark that James will be in the stroke seat? I mean,
let's put it this way. James stroked for once on our training camp in a viz, and he came off, and I switched it back afterwards, and he said, I guess that was my last time stroking the boat.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
To be fair, actually, James is great, and he's done some brilliant things, and actually did some great stroking of some seat racing in Caversham a week or so ago. So I think in the 4 in particular, actually, James has done a really great job of stroking. But in the 8, Dow was the better choice for sure.
Talking about Dower, and you probably won't be in a position to answer this. How likely is it that Dower will be in the British team at the World Championships in Shanghai this year?
I'd be very surprised if he wasn't. You know, he's won both trials. He's won everything with George. James is not far behind. He's exceptional. He's got some X factor around him as well. I think actually, in particular, in the pair in the 4, probably over the 8. You know, he's obviously great in the 8, but I think in those boats he's particularly good. So I'd be shocked if he wasn't. And yeah, I'm sure he's on track for that.
How do we talk about you and Caversham? Because you had that year with Ollie and Tom coaching the pair, which I think must have been, you know, really good for you. You're taking those guys on after the boat race. But it doesn't really seem like Caversham were much interested in you sort of being part of the coaching thereafter, which I kind of thought was sad, really. But I don't know what you can say about that, or perhaps you don't want to talk about it at all.
I don't know. I mean, I guess they've got a full-time team there, Martin, you know, and I guess there aren't many people coming in from the outside. So, you know, I've got a job here at Cambridge, and I guess that's the nature of it. And in 22, we had, you know, it was a super fun project. I mean, I think that's the thing to talk about, really. You know, I'm very close to the 2 boys, and you know, we're very, very close now still. And we had super fun. I mean, it was a quite a unique clique, I guess. I don't think we probably even knew it coming out of the boat race, but the experience we had then over the summer really was, was game changing. I think for all of us in a way, but certainly for me. I shouldn't speak for them. So it was super fun, and it was a really good collective, I suppose. I've got great respect for them. They showed that respect for me, so I really enjoyed it. I do. I mean, I'm coaching Cambridge, that's my job, but I do coaching at the World Championships, the Olympics is definitely a super fun thing. And, it's definitely something I'd like to do at some point more in the future.
Yeah. Where were you when you watched Tom and Ollie in the Olympic pairs final, and what was your reaction?
Yeah, I was in the stand because Dara Elizadeh was out there sculling for Bermuda, so helping out Dara again. Second Olympics, which was super great. Different experience, but than coaching Tom and Ollie, but like fantastic. And he's a brilliant guy. So I was in the stands, pretty upset for them, and but lucky. I'm really glad that I was there and I was able to, and I, ducked out the stands soon after. I was able to be around the boat park when they got in. Ollie had dope testing. I tried. Been really important for me to not, because of the relationship we had and the coaching we had, not to get in the way there. They had a coach, Christian, great coach, doing a brilliant job with them. I really wanted to try and sort of not get in the way of that at all. But after the race, wanted to be around, and I spent a bit of time with Tom, and I said, do you want me to? I'm about to head back to the village. Do you want me to hang around? He said, yeah. So we went for some lunch in the canteen and just tried to, be a bit of a shoulder. Let's not get this wrong. They won Olympic silver medal. They've done incredible, made an incredible achievement. But obviously they were so close to getting the gold. And then able to go back into the stands, and they were with their family and stuff, hang around and just see both of them. So, had a couple of drinks with them in the evening as well, and just really important for me actually to be around them and see the two boys at that point. But yeah, it was hard because I know what they've done, what it meant, and obviously then how close it was.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you, Rob. We started out by me talking about you as this amazing coach, and certainly I'd say you were one of the top coaches in the world at the moment, which I guess must mean that people, programs look at you and think, oh, I'd quite like Rob to be running our program. And then there's the other side of it, the sort of people like Harry Mahon, who was like Mr. Harvard and there for life sort of thing. Where do you sit in that in terms of your career at the moment?
It's a good question. I don't know is the short answer. I mean, look, my affinity with Cambridge is clear, Finally, I could have done this somewhere else, but, this is what it's about for me. I mean, I grew up in Cambridge. I'm Cambridge born and bred. My dad was a college boatman down here. Something you might not know, Martin. And I'm an institution in it for good or bad. They can't get rid of me at the moment. So Cambridge is very special to me. And I've been involved, not as a chief coach, of course, but I've been involved in over 20 boat races now. So it's a hell of a time. As chief coach, obviously a short period with the men at Cambridge and then with the women, but even that's going back now 13 odd years. So it's been a bit of a stretch. And I still love it. It's still brilliant. I'm still inspired in different ways every year. We get a new crop of guys in, and it's like, right, how do we do this with these guys? Let's go. And I absolutely love it. But, at some point, I think it's always good to change. And the tastes I've had of the international coaching, obviously, certainly there's an itch there to scratch. And I'm interested in that area of coaching as well. But there's no hurry. I've got a few more years in me, hopefully.
Yeah, you're young yet. When will, or have they already, your thoughts turn to the 26 boat race?
Yeah, I mean, it's a crossover, isn't it? We're in particular, we find out guys that might have got in to the university for next year, and we get that information. It's very over time. It's piecemeal, really. It's bits and pieces drop in. So we have a decent group coming in next year. We're excited about that. We're thinking about that for sure. I mean, I'm pretty focused on this Henley campaign we want to put together right now.
Yeah.
We want to do a good job of that. And actually, that in Leeds, we've got plenty of returners from this year's squad. Noam, Luke, Matt Edge. Some of the new guys we had in this year are looking towards doing PhDs out of their masters this year, which is really exciting. So that's part of that process, right? Henley this year goes into next year's program. So it threads together, but certainly it's on the mind.
Yeah, this is another fantasy rowing question. Not sure you want to necessarily take it, but if you could take one athlete from any country to add to your squad,
alive or dead?
Well, that's a good question. Whoever you want to talk about, really. And someone maybe that you've admired or...
Well, I'm going to go back some years, Martin. Growing up, my dad's idol was Thomas Langer back in the day.
Wow. Yeah.
So my dad taught me to scull right over left because he sculled right over left because he was,
GDR.
And which was really unhelpful as it turns out because everyone else sculls left over right. So I had to switch, but that was maybe helpful in itself. And I was an average club oarsman, but I could row both sides and scull and do all that. But he was magical in the single. I think he was great to watch and that period. So I was trying to scull in the 90s. So him and Zeno Muller were really great inspirations in a sculling sense for me. It was brilliant to work with James. I mean, he was a knackered old boy when he came to us, but he was a real inspiration to me as a rogue in that period. I mean, maybe it would have been nicer to have him when he pulled 15 minutes for 5K, not 16 something. But I mean, hey, let's drop Redgrave in there somewhere. That would have been cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think you've already addressed this. Cam, who does very loyal follower of Crossy's Corner, but I know you've talked about Marco and Tim McLaren. Maybe you could mention a couple of others.
There's lots. Yeah, I mean, I'll mention Donald Leggett because he doesn't get enough credit for what a great coach he is, and still helping out Bobby at St Paul's now. He's a different character, but I learned a hell of a lot from Donald. He's got a great eye and a great vision for technique. Of course, my first few years at CBC here were under Robin Williams. Learned a hell of a lot, obviously, from Robin, and just one of the best coaches they've been in the last 20 years or so. So. So there would be key features. I think they would probably be the key people.
Yeah. So I think we've been talking for over an hour now. I think I could go on to talk for a lot more. I'm just wondering, is there anything that we've missed out that people might like to know that you'd be happy to talk about?
I don't know if there's anything people want to know about me, Martin, but I don't know. I it's been a good conversation. Anyone out there that wants to come to Cambridge, we're interested. So let's get the banner out there. Come talk to us. I like to think we have a really good philosophy on rowing and life as well, and the balance of those things. I think that the piece with Tom and Ollie is really interesting because they lost the boat race, and an old blue came up to me after the race. I forget who it was, but he said to me, "God, those guys are such great supporters of Cambridge rowing," and that doesn't happen with the young guys like that necessarily all the time. It certainly doesn't happen with guys that have lost the boat race necessarily. And, they're great champions of it. So I think that comes down, to the way we go about our business, the ethos we try and have. We're trying to make people better. We might lose boat races here along the way. It's going to happen at some point. But, we're just trying to do the best we can and strive and be good people and create good relationships. And that's a big part of being at Cambridge.
Yeah, I think it's quite striking as well in terms of people who have helped, given their time and support and cash to the Light Blues have not always been people that have won boat races. Actually, quite the reverse. Yeah. Actually, the old Blues, which says something about Cambridge.
100%. I mean, an untold figure actually is Roger Stevens, who you may or may not know, Martin. But Roger was president in the 80s here when we were in that losing period of winning one race in 15 years or whatever it was. And Roger lost, and he was our club manager in the early 90s. And he's the guy that went out and hired Harry Mahon, Robin Williams. He hired me for his sins in the end as an assistant coach back in there as well. And Roger invested a huge amount of his life into changing Cambridge rowing. And that's, there are so many people like that behind the scenes doing those kind of jobs, but he was very, very significant in that period, and that's moved on. So, people are really passionate about the boat race, passionate about the club. And, and ultimately that's that's the most wonderful piece about being here is, God, I mean, at the dinner, the relationships I have with even guys that haven't rowed it, I haven't coached, but because I've been around so bloody long, I know these people really well now. The Dave Gillards of this world, David Cassidy's, Jim Garman's, Matt Britton's, Stephen Peel's. These guys that go back and have been huge, big influences on the club and have done a lot for us. You have good relationships with these people because you've spent so much time with them. So that's the wonderful thing about Cambridge and doing the boat race.
So going to close now, Rob, but you don't have to limit this to rowing. But, going to think about a magic fairy. You've got one wish for next year. You could wish for anything. What would it be?
Oh, God, I don't know. I'm not a big one for wishes, Martin. What's in front of me?
No. It's a tough question, actually.
What can we do, And of course, it's winning next year's boat race and bringing this different collective people we'll have next year together, doing, more of these good things. I think Henley is another one. We've just not been successful at it. So we hope we will this year. I hope we will again next year and be able to do something there. It won't always be with full boat race crews, but we should be winning events at Henley year on year, in my opinion. Let's get better. Let's do some let's do some big things.
Okay, we'll end the live part of this interview. You've been absolutely fantastic. Thank you for taking everything that's been thrown at you and all the other questions as well. Rob Baker, you've been a star. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, Martin.